School District of North Fond du Lac. And then the roll call, Matthew.
Here.
Hawk here, Goldowski's absent, Gefferman.
Here.
And Yeager.
Here.
Okay, if we have a quorum, so then we'll move to the next item, the report on public notice.
So public notices were posted at the entrance doors of the district office, FLC, BAMS, Horace Mann High School, and at KFZ, the reporter, on February 14th, 2023.
Okay, and Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Item E, new business. First item is to discuss and consider School District of North Fond du Lac $18,500,000 general obligation school building and facility improvement bond.
And we have Mike Clark here from Baird that's going to walk us through the first and the second agenda item tonight. So thank you, Mike, for being here.
Sure. Good evening. So we took bids this morning on the district's referendum debt, $18.5 million. We only received 2 bids, which was a little disappointing. There had been pretty good activity. I think the CPI number kind of spooked some people yesterday, being a little bit higher. So I think there's a lot of people just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting to kind of see what direction the longer term rates were going to go. But the bids I would consider good. And the fact that they were so tight kind of gives you an indication that's kind of where the market's at. Huntington Securities was a winning bidder at a little over 4.25%. And we did restructure a little bit because of how they bid. Their couponing was a little bit unique. So your final rate came in at 4.2537%. A little note there. Summary of the issue, again, these are general obligation school facility improvement bonds, the full 18.5, so this will complete the referendum financing. The settlement date and data date is April 3rd of this year. We wanted to get it past April 1 because that's when your principal payments are scheduled, and we wanted 20 years because remember, one of the options we looked at was to have a 2-phase borrowing and spread and not do the other borrowing until calendar year 24. That was for bank qualified purposes, but as of right now, there's really no difference between bank qualified, non-bank qualified. So I think doing the full amount was the right approach. Your first interest would be April 1 of 24. So in the 23-24 fiscal year will be your first levy for the referendum. And we'll look at the financing plan in just a second. Moody's affirmed to AA3, which is great. The district was just upgraded this last summer to a surveillance rating. The district doesn't ask, but ever since 2009, 2010 oopses that some of the rating agencies had, they do more surveillance rating reviews. They kind of check up on districts more often, and in that process, they looked at you, and we ended up having a conversation and ended up getting an upgrade back then, and they maintained that level, which it would have been a surprise if they would have dropped the rating after just increasing it. The winning bidder did include purchased bond insurance, Build America Mutual AA, which was a little unusual, but they always have that option, and it's part of their cost, so it's factored in to determine what the lowest cost of the district is. So even when they did that, they were still the lowest cost, Huntington. Looking at the financing plan, this is a format I know we've looked at before. I know Jordan was here last month and talked to the district. So I'll start at the far right-hand side, the combined mill rate. Again, we are targeting kind of using the 21-22 fiscal year, the $44.52 tax rate for Fund 39. That's just the referendum approved portion of the district's levy. And we were able to maintain with a little restructuring. We had the 1 year in, that would have been 24, 25, 25, 26 pop up a little bit. We just moved some bonds out a little bit to keep that under that. So using modest valuation growth estimates going forward, there's not a single year going forward, and actually after the first 4 or 5 years, you'll be 15, 20 cents below where you were from a tax rate standpoint. Now, and we know that's one part of the equation in terms of what determines the tax bill. But again, we were projecting much higher than that. And we knew that at the time of the referendum that was a high estimate because the district had some flexibility in some things. So we're very pleased with that. In terms of the total interest cost, what was projected at the time of the referendum and what was being presented to you tonight, it's the interest cost is $1.943 million less than the total interest cost than what was projected during the referendum. So you'll see some nice drops, and it tapers down fairly quickly. And again, what are we using? We're just using 1% property value growth estimates going forward, which is well below what the district, especially in a district like yours, which is experiencing some growth in terms of residential homes. So overall, good news, better than projected. The 2 bids was a little disappointing. We just did on Alaska on Monday, and theirs was a 415 rate, but their payback schedule was not as back-end loaded. Because like a 15-year mortgage is typically a lower interest rate than the 30 years. So your bonds on the shorter end have a lower interest rate than the longer end. More of your bonds are on the longer end. I think that accounts for some of the difference. And then I think the market has been backing up over the last probably 5 to 7 days, but still below where we were projecting during the referendum. The next page is the defeasance. I'll wait to address that, but following that is the actual rating report. Again, talking about the solid finances, the operational question, passing was obviously a big help for your rating as well. And the growth of, the uptick in enrollment, we just don't see that a lot in districts around the country, but especially in Wisconsin, the majority of the districts are declining, so that's also a positive. Could create some issues down the road in terms of capacity issues, depending on how fast it grows, but as a whole, it's viewed as positive. So with that, I'll conclude my comments and take any questions.
Mike, you said you're disappointed in the number of bidders. Had there been, say, a handful more, would that have affected the rate much? Or? Not
necessarily. We also did Denmark on Monday. And they had, was it 6 bidders, I believe. And Northland, who was your cover bid, your second place, or in your case, last place, they won that bid. So they've been very aggressive in these kind of mid-size issues. The 15 to 30, or you get some of the bigger firms who don't necessarily get too excited about those size of issues. So they've been very aggressive. So, and Huntington as well has been bidding on those types. So, I mean, you never know, but obviously, again, people are buying these bonds, are buying them to resell to other people, to bond funds, whatever it might be. So if they aren't sure they can buy them and sell them and make some money, they're not going to buy. And so I think just given the uncertainty of the market trending, the CPI number coming in a little bit bigger yesterday, I think that just put a few people on the sidelines. As a whole, we're not disappointed in the rate, but I would just give you more comfort if you get more bidders. But that doesn't happen often, but we've had situations where we've had one bidder. You pick a day and you hope everything aligns. But looking at the sales from earlier this week, like I mentioned on Alaska, it was a 415. So we're not too far off that, especially when you factor in the structure difference where yours is more back end loaded. So that gives us some comfort that that's kind of where the market is currently, so.
And Mike, what was the estimate that we used for referendum?
It
We
was,
were below,
it was 475 or 450.
uh,
Yeah.
I thought it was 450, but.
It's 450,
Yeah.
it's 450.
So we were below.
Yeah,
that, which is
your
great.
interest rate, your total interest cost was almost $2 million less than what was projected during the referendum. The tax impact well below what was being projected during the referendum. And we knew that was gonna be the case because we had structured it in such a way that it would put the district in a very good position and communicated a higher cost, again, given some of the valuation things going on. So happy with the overall result. A few more bidders just would have been nice. Would have made a difference. Hard to say because again, the two that did bid have been very active in winning some bids over the last few weeks. And this size. Obviously, we had some larger, $90 million deals. Then you get a lot of the New York firms that come in and bid. You typically don't see them on anything this size. It's more of the regional, like Huntington, Northland, BOK, Bank of Oklahoma. They've been pretty active. I was surprised that they didn't bid on this. I'll have to talk. Person who heads that up for them and bids on Wisconsin deals. We go to the same church, so next time I see him, I'll have to ask him where he was. So.
All right, so those sold this morning, and then we approved.
Yep.
What are we doing with this motion?
Yeah, so the resolution,
We should have-
the documents came from Quarles. These are the final resolutions.
Mhm.
The there's the title at the top is the capitalized portion. That is what should be read into the minutes. If you have that in front of you. Does anybody have an electronic version? I can pull up. Do you have that?
Yeah, it should be right in the agenda. It should-
In
The resolution authorizing,
Yeah, this is.
oh, no, that's the
Oh,
fees
that's
is
right,
wrong.
that's one. Yeah.
Resolution authorizing, awarding the sale of 18.5 million general obligations school construction facility improvement bonds.
All right. So, any further questions or discussions from the board? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to award the sale of $18,500,000 general obligation school building and facility improvement bonds to, do you want Huntington in there?
No, you don't even have to have that, just that title is fine.
Okay.
So moved.
Second. Okay. All right. And then roll call when you're ready.
Mackey,
Yes.
Jaeger,
Yes.
Geckerman,
Yes.
Yes,
Goldowski, yes.
motion carries. Item number 2 is to discuss and consider resolution authorizing the establishment of an escrow account with respect to certain of the general obligation school improvement bonds dated April 4th, 2018, which are known as the Phoebus transaction.
Yeah, so as been discussed prior, the district has some funds accumulated in the debt service fund and now is using those funds to pre-fund some of, not the new issue we just talked about, but the previous issue. And to deposit those dollars into an escrow account, the escrow agent will become legally responsible for those obligations. So if you look at the defeasance page of the handout that I had, do we have that? Page 5. Looking at that 2038 maturity, that 1.9 is a kind of a salmon orangish colored box under the Ford. Your scheduled payment is 1.92 million that year. By depositing into the escrow account, that payment, your portion of that payment drops to $305,000. The escrow agent becomes legally responsible for that payment, and that payment will be made on April 1, 25 is when the debt is callable. So the escrow agent will hold those funds. They also pay the interest associated with that portion of that principal, not just the principal payment, but also the interest up until the call date. So it generates a savings for the district, and again, it's all taxpayer savings by doing so, because it's being paid off on the call date versus being held until 2038, being paid off 13 years early, $823,000 in interest savings. Again, this is a pretty common practice, given the fact that state budget focused dollars on state aid, which was driving down tax rates, and districts were levying, actually kind of managed their levy and using this opportunity to pay down some debt. There are some costs associated, which I know we've talked about. Baird's fee, there's Quarles and Brady, who writes the resolution you're looking at, and works with, reviews the trust agreements. Associated Trust is the escrow agent. And then there's a CPA verification fee, because since Associated is taking the legal responsibility to make that debt payment, they want to make sure that they're receiving enough funds to do that. And they're not going to, if Baird calls and says, that's enough, they want it outside, so that's the need of the CPA verification. So again, this is a positive from a credit rating standpoint. I know we talked about that when we did have the rating call, because your debt levels with the new debt on top of the last referendum are a little elevated, a little above average for a district your size, nothing crazy, not bad, but the fact that you were defeasing or planning to defease definitely is a positive. I don't think it would have, if you weren't doing it, you weren't going to be downgraded. I don't want to oversell, but it's those types of transactions and activities and decisions do build up over time. And it definitely can play a role in future evaluations for your creditworthiness. So.
I guess not to oversimplify it, but just in more lay language, if I'm asked or we're asked, basically we're taking the money that the referendum authorized and that we sold today, the bonds, putting it in savings.
The bonds were sold today. The 18.5 is a separate transaction.
Oh.
These are dollars the district had levied a little extra over the years to kind of manage this overall levy, accumulated these funds, and now we're using it to pre-fund, because you're not paying them off. You can't technically pay them off until 26. You're pre-funding them by putting them into an escrow agent or escrow account, where the escrow agent then becomes responsible for making the payments. And then that's going to generate the savings by paying that debt off in April 1 of 2025, not 26, but in 25. And so that's where the savings is being. So it's really a separate, still within the debt service fund, but this is something the district had accumulated over a few years. And then that and some interest earnings that may have been accumulated in the debt service fund, and taking those funds and paying down your, from a legal standpoint, paying down your debt.
All right. Anything else on the second item? Any questions? All right, then I will entertain a motion to authorize the transfer of funds, the establishment of an escrow account with respect to and the defeasance of certain of the general obligation school improvement bonds dated April 4th, 2018.
Make that motion.
Second.
Roll call?
Peckerman, yes. Matthew,
Yes.
Hawk,
Yes.
Goldowski, yes. Jaeger.
Yes.
All right, motion carried.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate all your work.
Thank you.
Now you get on to what all these people.
Thanks, Mike.
It was for you, Mike. It was for you.
All right, then item number 3, discussion on the Treffert Way for the Exceptional Mind New High School.
So I'm going to introduce Dr. Patterson, Dr. Putty. I don't know who else is presenting with you this evening. Are you the lone or? Okay.
Tom and Jerry.
Great. And they're going to walk us through, some of the work they've been doing for quite some time and sharing out. First of all, I want to say thank you, families and staff members and all people from the Treffert Way to be here tonight. Really appreciate you coming in and being part of this too. So without further ado, though, I'll turn it over to y'all and you can start the presentation here. If I can figure it out.
Did you say
Under
y'all?
slide.
Yeah, I did say.
There you go.
Thank you.
You bet.
Is it right here? I'm liking.
Who drives this, Jody?
You can
Sorry,
drive.
under view.
Thank you.
This side on the very top.
There we go. Good. Awesome. Do
Scary.
you want this? You want this? Who wants it?
He gets the control to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is pretty scary.
Scary.
Where's Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman. Dr. Mino, members of the board, members of the Treffert Way family. I know this means a lot to you, so thank you all for coming. We're going to do, in Alan Patterson terms, a short presentation. And I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till we finish, because I'm sure there'll be a lot. And at that point, we'll do the best we can. I also want to thank members of the school board who answered that questionnaire for us. That was very helpful for us to give us some ideas. What we want to do tonight is to talk about both the feasibility of the school and understand why we are promoting this, and also then to get into some of the numbers and the projections. A lot's happened over the last 3 months. There have been some huge epiphanies, at least for me, I think for a lot of people, sitting down and hearing from parents and having Dr. Mino be part of those discussions, I think was beyond enlightening. It was really very gratifying to hear what parents have to say, and also Dr. Mino's interest and listening ability to find out what's on people's mind. I think it's really opened up a great point for our discussion. The second big epiphany, I think, has been the opportunity to work with Dr. Mino. We've just begun, but it's opened up a lot of channels that we know need to be open. And the third would be the opportunity to present to you before. I mean, in retrospect, probably seems a little crazy that we haven't been here, but we're here now. And if this all works out, we want to be in the room where it happens. And Meg and I are going to take up a collection by get everybody a ticket to Hamilton so that they can hear that song sung. Okay, I thought I would be immune from jokes, but it's not possible. So let's talk about why we're talking about a charter school and why that would be us. When we use the word us, we're talking about the District of North Fond du Lac. And why now? Because there's some very specific reasons. It's very interesting when you look at the capability of what a charter school can do. Dr. Mino and Nick from the state have a lot of experience in working with charter schools. And one of the biggest elements that a charter brings to a community is that it can be a lightning rod. It can be a learning lab. It can be a chance to experiment and try things. I don't think we fully appreciated the value of that. But the more we've been at it, some of us 4 years, some of the staff and the original writers of the grant know more. So the difference is we're talking about a philosophy of education and an approach to education that is broader than just the genius and kindness of Dr. Treffert. It's something that in its simplicity is really pretty neat. By being able to meet kids where they are and take them to places that really maximize their potential. So the fact that we have this opportunity to use the flexibility, I think, is huge. It helps us potentially fill a gap that could exist in the community by being able to offer this type of education to the community. What we've learned about learning, this you look at these and say, well, how new is this? It's not just so much that they're new, it's how they're used and applied. And that's the difference. That's what I think is the genius of being able to say, oh, okay, let's start with a student, find out what that person's needs are, and make sure that we can hone to that particular child's strength. Place-based, I like that. That means the community is the laboratory. The community is the school, or it could be. So it really expands it beyond the four walls. And then the importance of relationships probably goes without saying. And the other element that is important for us is the idea to build into any school the community impact. So the concept of mastery is something that's been discussed before. But what we wanted to show you is the less traditional way to measure student success is not just credits and grades. It's not that they're not important. And it's not just this would apply to what have been our Treffert Way elementary students. What we're talking about is if you set standards that deal more with behavior, then you start to match what students have to do to get there. And the big point is that it has to be aligned to what North Fond du Lac requires. And that's probably a discussion we've never had before to sit down. And that's a discussion that we need to have to drive this forward. So you say, well, what's curious problem solver? Well, if you looked at that, it would be in many cases called critical thinking. So that's not as if these are new. It's just that if we can map what the behaviors and the skills are needed, that's kind of psychobabble, but the point is we can talk about the concept of mastery that really transcends what a grade might be specifically. Why us? Why the district? Well, we got a grant. We got a grant for $650,000. That's a nice chunk of change. And Meg will go through that. We have that grant. We're in a planning year, and then we have that grant for 2 more years. We've got the experience of working with a charter school. You're looking at the magicians in the background there that have lived and worked through this. We think, and this is work to be done, that there are other students in the district that can benefit from a different way of learning. That's really what we want to emphasize. It's not that it's a special school. It's a different approach to how students learn. And the great news is there are experts within this school district that really understand what the behavioral needs are and need to be, and can provide guidance and expertise. And that's not just saying among the Treffert staff. We're saying that exists across the school district. Why now? Well, I think the biggest point here is who knew? And I think this is just the opportunity of having someone new come in as a learning leader to the school district and say, I think we need to map this out. And in retrospect, you say, well, that's pretty brilliant when you think about it. It's like, let's see what we got. And in doing so, we feel we're biased, and we're selling that there's a piece that is offered that a charter school, a charter high school can provide. And so that's really our point for being here tonight.
Okay. I get into the details, so that was the fun part. Thank you, Dr. Patterson.
It's on fun.
But yes, so now, the questions that you guys have shared with us, we really appreciate it. And we try to answer them in the slides throughout the rest of the presentation. We've put a lot of words on these slides. We can share this with you afterwards so that you can process. And I'll do my best to highlight what we feel is most critical to be hearing tonight. So what are we asking for from all of you? We'll go through each of these individually. Oh, you're gonna click for me too?
Yeah, I'm
All
gonna
right, you can click it. Next slide, please, Dr. Patterson. Okay, commitment to partnership. So I think we're at a critical time when we look at the opportunities. Yes, we've got the $650,000 grant. We appreciate that. We've got the support of DPI, seeing this as a viable and valuable contribution to the charter community. More so, we feel like we've got the right leader and we're asking the right questions with the group in this room about what does that mean for the larger district. Really, the purpose of charter schools, as we've talked about so many times, is to do that research, that development, to innovate and move forward, practices in our schools, not just in our building, but across the district, and that can be carried over. So that partnership that we're striving for, we realize we can do better. We can do better tomorrow than we've done yesterday, today, and we can help forge that relationship with the district in a different way. I think we've got the group to do it, and I think we've got the experience of charter leadership at our table, which is exceptionally helpful. So a couple of main points here is really looking at that partnership and how we leverage staff across the district to really help provide that feedback to the design of the high school. What are our community's needs? What are our school district needs? And then that ongoing collaboration and resource sharing. I know as a district-wide and your strategic planning, you're looking at that. Like, how do we best utilize the talents in all of our staff across our buildings and all of our resources? And we'd like to be a part of that conversation. And then focusing on the perspective of parents. A lot of those are in the room today. And again, I just echo the thanks for being here. It's been so exceptionally important to us, and we've been so grateful for the feedback we've heard from our Treffert Way community. We want to hear from the larger community as well, so we can make sure that we're getting all of those inputs. Thanks. I'm not used to having this much support.
I'm
Okay.
here for you.
Here's the big one on the budget and the financial support. We've got some additional details that we can share with you if you'd like to break this down a bit further. But really what we're asking for and projecting over the next several years. So looking into the 23 and 24 school year, we'll see our student projections kind of build up from 20 students starting this upcoming year down to 40. Then we also have what is our space needs. I know that we have been and will continue to be flexible as we look at the space. There's been discussions about where this would be, and that's really a district discussion. We can tell you what our needs are for our model and what we would appreciate being considered in that discussion. But ultimately, we know space is a resource in our community that's hard to find. Really, how we see it is, starting out that first year is that 2 classrooms to support the learning model that we're developing. The staff breakdown, and again, this is projected, is that we would need 1 teacher next year, an instructional assistant, and then on our projected caseload for special education, a 0.5 special education teacher. This is where we start to have those discussions about what are those shared resources in our school district. For a 0.5, would that be someone who is employed in the district currently, or somebody who is a 1.0 in the district in the future? And we're sharing part of that to share that mission of collaboration. You guys can read very well. I'm not going to go through all of these details, but you can see that it builds downward. One of the great questions that we received on our survey is, what does it cost to educate a high school student currently in our district? And I say, that's a wonderful question that I can't answer for you. There's so many, intricacies into the funding sources and those things. But I think that's what we need to be looking at, because we know innovation is great if it's sustainable, right? And so we need to make sure that we're being sustainable in our model and that it's comparable, that cost benefit analysis is weighing out in the right direction. Okay. Thank you, Alan. What does the grant pay for is another great thing that's been asked and we've been working through. So you can see we have our planned out budget for the next 3 years, including this year. So you can see this is different than our current grant that's sunsetting this year for our elementary school. That was a 5-year grant. This year, the state has changed because they're up for new federal grant funding. They've abbreviated all of the grants that were awarded this last time around. So good news, same amount of money we would have gotten if it was a 5-year grant in a lesser time frame. So we get to spend that very responsibly in a 3-year period instead of a 5. But the total amount, $650, was what we were awarded if it would have been a 5-year grant as well. So we just have to be a bit more strategic. This year, as Alan mentioned, is our planning year. We've had A lot of great planning happening with our planning team. We've got Nick consulting with us from Works and CISA. And so we're excited to continue that work collaboratively. Next year would be our implementation years where we would start to spend funding on any of these areas here. So there are some restrictions, as we talked about in the past, with what a grant fund can be used for. However, it really is for that building the capacity of your charter school, getting it started, getting that innovation going. There are some things that would be bought in terms of equipment, furniture, school supplies, but a lot of it is about development. We've talked a lot about mastery transcripts and those things. It's about putting the time and effort in that we don't have in the budget in the regular school district to say, yes, we're going to have a 0.5 teacher really digging in and developing mastery transcripts, how this would play out in a high school of our size. So that's what it would provide to us that would lend itself to the larger community. Okay, I'm going really fast. All right, I get excited about this stuff. Okay, site and location, I think we've already talked. This is the big question in the room that I see us really needing to sit down and partner on. We do feel, again, that we'll need the 2 classrooms in that first year. We recognize we might need to change and move. You guys were just having some great budget discussions about your awesome referendum that the community supported. And that means there's going to be construction in the district. There's going to be restructuring of how the schools look. So we know that we'd have to be flexible partners in that arena. And upon school expansion, that additional space might be needed. The largest thing to recognize is that the school must be located in the village or in the school boundaries, the district boundaries of North Fond du Lac. Okay. Staffing, we've already went over this as well on our slide about projected cost. But again, just looking at that breakdown so you guys can have that information as you're looking at that. We do see staffing needing to increase as the school grows, but not at the same incremental level that we would typically see per student, for example. So our 2.5 is going to carry itself a lot further in year 2, year 3, as we grow. Okay, big elephant in the room. What do we do if we don't have a charter school? I think I take a big deep breath and get a little sad for a moment. I think everybody in this room will do the same. We need to make sure that we're taking care of our kids in our community. And we need to ask ourselves why we're saying no to the opportunity of innovation. I think we really would have to, if we were looking at no, consider each of the individualized academic plans of kids that may be transferring from Treffert Way, 8th and 9th grade, into our high school. What would, right now that's 14 current students that are in our 8th and 9th grade years at Treffert Way, Exceptional Mind. So that would be a likelihood that they would be transferring into Horseman. We'd want to make sure that we have some caregiver engagement. A lot of them are here ready to engage in this room right now about what is the plan for these students and how are we going to best support that transition. We would highly recommend, these are our recommendations, that we would hire a go-to support person to ensure that our students are continued to be set up for success. And additional staffing requirements would really be based on what is the enrollment at HMHS, what is your current staffing structure look like, and how many of our students come over, and where would they be best situated as we go through these individualized plans. But we do project that there would be additional FTE required. Okay, in a nutshell, I'm not good at nutshells, but we really do believe, this is an opportunity for us to look at education differently at the high school level. We believe that the work of our elementary and middle has proven our commitment, our staff's commitment, our family's commitment to looking at education differently. And we know that we all know we can improve how we support, how we educate, and how we inspire our future generations. So this will give us that opportunity to continue to push forward and to challenge the status quo, to stop doing what we're doing just because it's what we've always done, and to do what we know needs to be done, and to innovate and to transform learning in our schools. It's about not just, our model when we talk about what's the different strategies or things that we would do in our high school level. We could talk for hours about that. We'll get there if we move forward. But it's about changing from grades and teaching and passive learning and really transforming that to that hands-on, I'm going to construct my knowledge, I'm going to learn how to learn and carry that forward in a mastery way. So we look forward to continuing that conversation. Our ask of you would be, well, ask us any questions you have right now, to think about the potential impact and transformation we could have in our district. But also, if the answer is a no at the end of the day, please consider these innovative practices. Please push this idea of mastery forward, this transformation of how we can do school. That's if we're doing that in this district, we'll be really happy. And then I won't be as sad if the answer is a no, as I mentioned earlier. But, we just really appreciate that you guys are considering this. We appreciate that we've had the Treffert Way for the Exceptional Mind in our district. And we just want that to continue moving forward. Thank you. Next steps, yeah, it's kept a slide.
Well,
Like,
that's
mic drop, Yeah, so these are our next steps. This is our timelines. I know you guys have some discussions to do, and we need to determine when the vote of you will take place. We've modified our timelines. We're flexible beings, but this is kind of where we would be if the vote is a yes, and in the next things you would expect from our governance board to be delivering to you.
Yeah, we would want to move quickly. And first of all, thank you for having this meeting tonight, because I
Yes.
know you did this special. We voted a month ago, the
Yes.
Treffert Way board, using that same, let's make a decision, let's go meet with the North Fond du Lac School District board. One thing that was different than what we did in the past is that we would want to create a contract as soon as we possibly can, because that will lay out, little did we know, how important that is to the whole process. In other words, here's what we're going to do, and here's what we're asking you for. And then that way we have it laid out very clearly, so that if we started that in March, then we would have another couple of months then to talk this through and see that it's approved.
Yes. And I think for the planning to be successful, we need to look at the hiring of our lead teacher. We really need a strong go-to person at that high school level to be our communicator and our bridge builder across the district. And we need our families that are interested in this venture. I know most of them would shout right now, yes, we're waiting. We're waiting to know what comes next so that they can do the very best to make the next plan for their child.
Your questions?
Can I jump back to the budget slide?
Of course.
Thank you. So I guess a couple of questions, but here you've got 20 students next year. On the slide, a couple down, it says there'd be 14 going to Horseman.
Yeah, so our projected enrollment, as we move into a charter school for the high school level, it's not a guarantee that students that are currently enrolled in our charter school would then transfer immediately to our charter high school. It would follow the same lottery process and enrollment process that we followed in the past at our elementary and middle level. And so what that means is we have 20 seats available at our charter high school table, and then folks would apply to that school specifically. If there's more than 20 students that apply, we hold a lottery, and that's how it's determined who takes those seats. So that's where we intend to have 20 students, so additional 6 to our current 14 that are in 8th and 9th grade. What we know is if there's no high school, it's highly likely that those 14 students will transfer into Horseman. They've chosen this district as their home. Many of them live in the district. Some have open enrolled into the district because they were looking for something different, right? And so the likelihood, I'd imagine, would be that they would stay in this district with the peers that they've been with.
Is there a specific question you have about this?
Well, I wondered why it went from 20 to 14.
Mhm.
So I get that now.
Yeah.
And then this is, for each year, that's a total cost. That's not an incremental cost over the year.
Correct, total. Yes.
Yeah, and these the 25, 26, 26, 27 is, there's no grant money there. But then the obvious point, the painfully obvious point, is a grant does not fund.
Right, it's,
Teachers.
so in that I mean, we can get into the details, in that capacity building, so year 24, 25, our attention would be that our staff breakdown would be 2 teachers, using one of them as grant dollars, not instructional time, but grant dollars to fund that planning curriculum development.
Which is
further,
allowable.
Which is allowable, but we didn't put this on, we didn't want it to be
Yes,
confusing, because it's confusing to us as we parse through that and make sure that we're meeting all the regulations, but that this would be what we're asking from the district in terms of the staffing models.
Well, while this is a slippery slope, because we don't know all the factors built in, there is an overhead cost that Maria and Dr. Matt work on that could be applied to every student. When you think about it, not when you think about it, that's what happens. That's how you figure it. So we're basing this on what we know. We're taking average teacher costs, special education, instructional aid, and saying, okay, if we factored this out, this is what the budget would be. And if this were the only expense, the cost per student actually goes down from around 14.5 to about 11. And that's starting to sound like, well, that's pretty cool. With no degradation in the quality of the education. So there's now you start to see some differences in the organization because of the expanded capacity, the expanded number of students.
And when we talk about that partnership, that's really where we really look at, that's another opportunity for us to have a larger impact, being good stewards of our financial, state in the district level. And so we're projecting, yes, 2 teachers, but as we learn how this approach is working at the high school level, as we see how that partnership could grow and foster with the high school, is there ability to have more shared resources that lessens the overall cost?
That's a big point. And that's a discussion we haven't had up until.
And financially, that's beneficial, but we'd argue that's beneficial for all students to have the opportunity to get educators that are exposed to new ways of thinking.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
This might go back to Nick too, in contract language. So when you create the contract, do you have to establish that number? I just still remember, saying like, hey, we have a limit of 20 students, at least in that contract. Does it have to be laid out and by year, or how does that look, Nick? I mean, because that's also an important part of it too, to say like, if we're capping at this, if we're choosing to cap on that, it has to stay at that quota. So I'm just curious how that plays out.
It's not in statute like that you have to have a very specifically spelled out number. We see it in most contracts so that you have an idea. The board has an idea every year about what the capacity is. And also as you have this partnership in figuring out cost analysis, like what is that number that you're going to need in order to make this an economy of scale to a situation that it's affordable. What does need to be spelled out in contract is sort of the money exchange. So like what does the governance board get? Sometimes they put a per pupil rate. Sometimes they say 80% of what you generate in your local. Sometimes they just blanket say, we're going to treat that school like all the other schools in the district, which is fine to say. That's more of what's in statute is they just want to make sure that you've put some thought into funding the school at a rate that's going to work for the number of students that you're going to have in there. But we see ranges. We see up to a certain amount of students because that's what you feel comfortable with capacity wise. And then if they wanted to ever have, they being governance board and school, ever wanted to have more students than that, they would have to come back and amend the contract and work with you. Same with grade level. I think you've done that.
We've done that a few times, yes.
Yes, sir.
One of the questions that I had on the survey and then from some reading that I've done about charter schools is that beyond the planning grant that many, I don't know what percentages, but a high amount of charter schools operate yearly on grants, different grants from foundations and stuff like that. And I don't see that in here. And then I'm just wondering if there's been thought about that or maybe engaging a grant writer to help.
Yes, yes, and no. No. We haven't addressed that, and it can be done. Obviously, it's going to the right places. When we start talking about a North Fond du Lac charter school, it's a different kind of discussion than saying the elementary school that's based so much on Dr. Treffer's methodology, which you could say, well, then why wouldn't we be going to people in the community that support students that Dr. Treffer was so fond of and so generous to? So that's not answering your question and say, well, where's the money?
Mhm.
If we did that, and we can, we will need a grant writer. And we don't have one. And at this point, I don't know how we pay for one. And I'm not trying to dodge the question, but is there money out there? I'm sure there's money out there. I mean, Dr. Mino and Nick, I'm sure you could say, okay, if we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're really going to kick into something that will be gigantically inclusive, then there are places that we can go. So it's not that it can't be done. I think moving forward, we would have to do that. How we pay for that, I don't know. How do we pay for it?
We'll figure that out.
We'll figure that out. But it is, some schools do that, but there's a clearly defined, it's going to be hard to find somebody. Nick, tell me if I'm wrong on this. It's going to be hard to find somebody that's going to pay for just staff without it being inclusive of a certain program or approach or a particular need.
Yeah, I think what's challenging is in a small district like yours, do you want to compete with the school district or do you want to make asks together? I think what's unique about a charter school and that a lot of charter schools can raise money, probably to what you read, is because they're very specifically designed. So you have a very specific ask and you're only going to ask those people that align with your mission and vision. So if it's a work-based program, people that want to increase the pipeline, it makes a lot of sense for them to donate to that. But I think in a district yours, it's just a question to kind of have, are you asking the same people for money again? Or are you finding select people that are interested in whatever model you might have? So I think it's a greater conversation for you to have. But I do think with specific asks, there is money out there.
I think there's non-traditional, revenue
Right.
too, just in services and space and, our community and place-based model for the high school really will be continuing to push out to MPTC, Trefford Studios, Mercury, the other locations on where can we get some of that hands-on learning for our students that may reduce some of the space costs over time because we envision, that our afternoons really will be potentially out in the
and about.
The other piece is I think we've been really mindful that the district has been going to the community and asking for support, on all of the construction costs and everything that we'll be doing with this referendum. So we've had small success, I would say, when we're talking millions of dollars, right? But we've had huge success just with our community now and our grassroots effort of our craft fair and our families. And so we know just within our families, we've been quite successful of funding some of our additional costs at the elementary level. If we work together and dreamed bigger, I think, yes, we need to do better there.
And I'm thinking beyond the local community, that's
Absolutely.
a base, but with Dr. Treffer Trek, renowned, worldwide renowned, that there must be organizations out there that would believe in what he believed in.
Right. It's how do we carry that forward? So to Nick's point, if this were environmental education, it's like, okay, these groups will pop up and here's the money that they have. If we say this is a district-wide charter high school that includes our students that are coming from the Trefford Way Elementary School, then we have to be clear on what's the focus there, what's the hook, if I might say. And that's not to discredit that we're saying we're walking away from how we got to this point. So but that's not something we can do by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so if Dr. Mino said, okay, Dr. Patterson, you think you're so smart, you're in charge of this committee, and hear 4 other people, not go out and get some money. Because that's what it would take. It would have to be, I think, would have to be a district-wide initiative. Other questions?
Can you explain again, and you've done it once, so I apologize, I still can't quite follow it, of how you, so your lottery and how elementary was not necessarily all district people, and is that going to be the same, are the 2 lotteries or how you apply for this school, if that's the thing, how that happens and the difference, if there is a difference.
Absolutely. And I think we've learned a lot together on that. And I think that's one of the areas that we would really want to collaborate on moving forward is what is our enrollment policy. So while we're in the grant funded years, so I think that's where the confusion comes in for you, is we need to make sure, well, I think always with charter schools, but we need to make sure that we have a separate enrollment process. Anybody can apply to be part of our charter school. If they happen to live in the district and say we have a lottery and they're chosen from our lottery, and Nick, you can tell me where I get this wrong, then they are offered that seat. If they are out of the district and they are chosen in our enrollment process, yes, they have a seat at our school if they also have dual open enrollment to our school. So that becomes the question on what is the district's policy on open enrollment, what seats are available, just as it would be at FLC, at BAMS, at Horseman. And I think that's where in the past we may have made decisions that have led to a lot of out of school or out of district students accessing Trevor Way, and we love them all. We're happy they're here.
And there are students.
And there are people, right, and there are students. But I think when we're looking at the district funding, that is a piece of the equation that would need to be discussed.
Vicki, that's been the work bringing everything together too. And again, I don't know how many times it's been mentioned tonight, but Treffer's part of our district, and I think that's a big shift. And so we had to unlock and just learn a lot within that frame of just understanding. And I don't know how many conversations we've had about open enrollment this year, but I think I could work. I think I could work for the DPI now. Maybe.
And Nixon correct me, so I must have been right too. I'm coming with you.
But again, that point of you have the autonomy to have the lottery as a school. The district though then has to also take in consideration what is open and available. Right. Basically. Right. And if it's not open, then the people who are open or from outside the district, then they would not be able to be in that school at that time. If it was, different story.
So then that's, you'd do another drawing, or you'd have the
Or
lottery.
next person in line.
Next person in line. Yes.
That makes sense, Vicki.
More or less.
I think the biggest thing is you open enroll into a school district, not a school.
Right.
So they would open enroll in your district. Your district is sort of determining where your capacity is in partnership with this governance.
Yeah.
And so if there's X amount of seats at that school, they would say, yep, you are applying to our school, you're accepted, but the district kind of makes this decision on where we have room, both with services and space and capacity.
And I think that's a key component too, is the services that are offered at each of your district schools. So it may be that a particular student requires a service that is offered at Horseman that would not be offered at Trevor or the charter school, high school, or whatever we end up calling this lovely venture.
Yet once you're open and enrolled into the district, you're in the district. Right.
So they could, potentially want to be at Trevor, but if services couldn't be met for whatever reason, and we accepted them, because we can meet them as do you know what I'm saying? So then they would be maybe at Horseman, and that would be
Correct.
open.
Right.
And when you're open enrolling,
Right.
it may not even be services, because we have to remember that charters are a school of choice. So when you open enroll a student into your district, all of our families here have chosen to stay at our charter school due to the value it's bringing, but they could say, I'm no longer choosing to enroll in Trevor Way, and they're still a district student.
It's
Yeah.
great. learning opportunity.
And the reason for all of the confusion and the clarity that's needed and to work through all of this is the value that the autonomy that we are provided
Right.
and the flexibility that we are provided does allow us to do that true R&D innovative work. That may not, with the in-seat minutes, those types of things, we can look at how we get to that end goal of community ready and loving learning for their life student is a different route of getting there.
Another grant question, more or less. You had a slide up there. It said like 150, then 250, 250.
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter if do you have to spend down the 250 or is it just sum total? I'm asking this
Spend it
question.
down in any one year.
Like, so if you go beyond the 250 in 23, 24, can
Yeah.
you do
You
that?
can submit amendments, yes. So we're currently not near our 150 for
Right,
year one.
right.
So then we would, and Deb's our expert on that, wherever she is.
Yeah.
We would submit a carryover request and amendments and our budgeting plans. And that's common. We've done that a lot at the elementary level, as long as it's justified. DPI wants you to spend this money on what you've set out to do.
Yeah, well, on this stuff.
Right.
Let's just be
It's
clear.
true.
It's funny for me. I know, Nick, you've educated us on it. It's like building capacity. I don't think that's anything that most people talk about. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you're just having building students with capability. It means you're building an organization that can last.
And I think we'd all love to spend the money on what we feel is most valuable, but we have to remember that the purpose of the grant and the purpose of the charter is to build upon a new way of thinking and innovating. And so these standards are really set with the intention of ensuring those who are awarded are doing the good work of progressing education to the next level.
And do we have some plan or timeline to spend or what that spending looks like, in the next 3 years? When we have 650,000, I don't want to be done and say, oh, we got 550,000 or 400,000 left that we didn't even get to yet. And I'm just curious, have we started having those conversations about what that could look like?
We have. I can tell you right now, let's just stick on the 150, Doctor. It's like, well, we say we want a teacher in there working through the curriculum. We don't know if we have a high school yet.
Right. We had
So
a great
we could
conversation
do-
with an educator.
Yeah, that would be great. But to your point, yes, we want to know, you could say, well, $250,000 buys a lot of iPads. But there has to be, and there will be, a plan for this. The professional development it can be a big piece. We've got one van. Do we need another? We can buy furniture. I mean, I don't want to be cavalier and say this stuff adds up. But there has to be a plan so that you're right, we're not scurrying around the last minute and say, okay, how many?
Absolutely. And I
how
think
much
that's one
paper?
of the things we've really learned over the time at the elementary and middle is really understanding this and also understanding best utilization. And we looked at Tiffany, wherever she is, to help us, learn from how we've spent our money and what's the value that's been added from our purchases in the past, our professional development in the past, so we can really maximize these funds.
That to me, it's more of a business term, a marketer. When you talk about asset utilization, we don't talk about asset utilization. I mean, we don't. What I mean is, I think that, Dr. Mino, is part of this equation. You're looking at this across the district. So you got a half a person here, but where is that at that time spent? McDonald's decided to serve breakfast because the restaurant sat idle. And I think part of even this expenditure on the grant side would be, what's the plan for greater capability, for better asset utilization? That'd be a great discussion.
Yeah.
That would be an awesome discussion, because now we're not talking about, well, go take this workshop or let's subscribe to this magazine. It's like, no, we're taking the hill. I mean, we're pumped up about that. It's just real clear that we will not do this and cannot do this alone. It's not going to work.
Well, that's where,
We don't want to do it alone.
Am
I
I?
want to be careful how I say this, but
Okay,
I
I'll
don't
say that.
want to It's okay. I don't want it to come across wrong, but I think up until Dr. Mino got here, this was a separate deal.
Yeah.
None of the other schools worked with you. You didn't work with the other schools. A lot of the things that I think we would really benefit from is, you had a slide about all the things you're going to learn here. Well, if they're just learned and applied at perfect grade school, elementary school, or only the high school, we're not getting the value out of the money, out of the investment.
No.
And so unless we have a commitment from you guys and Dr. Mino that this is really going to be different than it has in the past, that the learnings you've made at the elementary school are going to start to be shared at Friendship and BAMS, and the learnings that, which I think, like that mastery transcript, I think that's an awesome idea. And it's a great way to pilot it here. But if it just stays there, so we're not only making an investment just in
Correct.
Trevor Way High School, we're making an investment in the North Fond du Lac district. And the way it worked in the past, that wouldn't have paid off. So we have to have a commitment from both parties that there's going to be sharing here and a real commitment to that.
I'll just give an example of this, and maybe Tiffany, you can talk a little bit more about this, but currently, as it was mentioned before, our district is in a strategic planning process where we have members from all schools, teachers, administrators, getting together, working with CISA 6, where we just got through our 4th day. We have 5 days total, but some of the things is, just looking at what is our current state, where are we at, and then what is our desired state. But we started doing some gap analysis on just some basic things, and it was interesting to hear conversations and tools and strategies that are being currently used at Trefford, where a year ago or less than 5 months ago that wasn't even heard of, were being used as examples in the large scale for the universal of the district. So, and I think it was the Trefford approach plan, right, Tiffany? I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but like the group, once we start having more conversations, and again, I'm new to North Fond du Lac, but one of the first things that we have to do is break down the silos between our schools. And we really have to have this continuum and this common language. And so as we do that, we're going to learn more from each other and we're going to grow better. And this is another, but I thought that example was just telling of, okay, if we're committed to these things, we're going to get there as well. I don't know if Tiffany, you want to say anything on that, or did I say it all?
Yeah, no, I think you explained it well, and really talking about that Trefford approach plan that we use really individualizes education for the child. The parents are part of that, the child's part of that, and really looking at those strengths and tying them in to help the children grow. And we really, I know Beth, you guys talked about it in your group. Beth is there with me up at CISA, and just really talking with other people in the district about how can these individualized plans be useful for kids at any building and any age across the district.
Our group changed the title to whole child plan,
To-
just looking at the whole child, and that would be their individualized plan.
And I think it's essential. I mean, it all comes down to relationships, right? We do better when we support each other, when we learn and grow together. And by no means do we say we want to walk into the school and say, you've got to do these TAPs and these Trefford approach. We want to learn what FLC is doing that's really innovative now and what's working and start to play. But we wish we could do this and we can't. Well, maybe that works in our model and we could give it a try. Let's work together for these kids and for our community.
We've learned a lot.
We've learned a lot.
So if this works out, I say pizza every Friday at your house.
I can do that.
Well, no, I'll help pitch you. Okay.
So this
She's
might
already
be a-
creating a menu, I think. Yes.
This might be a far-fetched question or statement. So if all of this collaboration works, which I think is awesome, and we, I don't know, 10 years from now or whatever, wherever that is, and all the schools are doing the same thing, does that charter then go away?
That would be a wonderful world
And
if we
it's
had
just
this.
all of
Yeah.
our district doing this?
Yes,
Do you
I
want to
mean,
talk about that from there are examples of that's happened actually just down the road in Appleton.
Yeah, and I think for some, it depends on, which article you read. but that was the original intention of charter, was to pilot something, to innovate, right, to incubate an idea, and then do it on a small scale to prove that it works in whatever community it is, and then to slowly disseminate that out to the larger ship that takes a little longer to turn, and then everybody starts doing pieces of it, and then the decision comes, which is a great decision. Do we keep the small ship that kind of gave us the example, or are we all doing this work now and we feel like we're meeting the needs of all kids? And then do we have another vessel that we're now creating to do another thing, to kind of continue to innovate and practice another strategy? As 10 years from now, we're probably figuring out another thing.
Correct.
Absolutely. And so if you read charter data too, which is really important, it's super boring for half the group, right? But the world I live in is you'll see a lot of closures. Oh, wow, there's been a lot of charter closures. Well, a lot of that data is because they have become part of the district. So the school code would close, but that's because the whole middle school is that now. And so, in Appleton, they started that, and they even incubated it in a small middle school. And then eventually everyone was like, but I want to be that and do that. So then the whole inner city middle school just became the charter, because that's just the practice that they wanted. And we see that happen. I wouldn't say more often than not, but I would say often.
Anything else?
I guess I would just add, Doctor, that, this last conversation that we've had is very important, very valuable, and if we can strive to that. But I also don't want to forget about the value that you've created already with the elementary school.
It's nice.
That's kudos to our team in the back.
They.
And all of our families for taking a chance on us. I mean, really, thank you.
Thanks for saying that. Thank you for giving us this opportunity and the pizza.
Yeah, any other questions, you know how to find us, and we can share out the presentation.
Can you get a copy of the slideshow?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Presentation. Thank you.
So what's our next steps?
So Rick just said, if you didn't hear that, but what's our next steps as a board? Obviously, tonight, I know a lot of people, we had, kind of programmed, and first of all, I just want to thank everybody, all of the families that came out to those parent sessions. It was just great to hear, your passion for learning and just, really sharing out your stories. And that helped me too, within the work that we were doing. So thank you for being a part of that, and also just being a part of this community right now. So it takes, it's awesome to see, again, like I said, it seemed so many faces here in support of this. You believe in it, which is so awesome too. And what we need to do is just, I think as a board, Rick, is, look at this a little bit, and, there's still some factors that have to be worked through, but, come back with a final decision like on the 27th of February. And that's just my opinion. I know people are waiting and we're in a hurry, but there are some things that also have to get worked through too, so that we can look at this. But I think we've got a lot of good information here. I think they've shared the presentation Dr. Patterson, Meg, shared tonight was just spot on, and it really shared a lot of the information that we need to. I think we need to look at, again, how it fits into, our district. How does this work together? What's going to make the most sense? Like, again, even the question about like, how do we spend these dollars that can then surge, not just the charter, but, other players probably within the district, within reason. So we can exponentially grow within the practice of whatever that is within the R&D that we need for not just the charter school players, but also players within our current schools. So I think, and a part of it, just so everybody knows too, is just like coming into a brand new place, you're learning, and my goal is, and what my job, I believe, is to try to bridge and try to understand and learn and validate, but at the same time, bridge and build our leaders so they get a better understanding of like where we could possibly go. We've had some of our school leaders haven't even been over to Trevor. So, and just, I think even that, just having that conversation through strategic planning and some of those things and the ideas, finally starting to think, because they just never have heard it. It's like you don't know what you don't know until you start playing and figuring things out. And we got to be much more curious as a district and less judgmental and really understanding the whole picture so that we can, grow together too. So where we're at, I think, to be honest, is like, I think I like people to take a little more time on what we've learned tonight. I know it's been a lot of time and maybe you're ready to go like right now, but I think there's also some things that we have to talk about too and figure out like what makes the most sense so that we can best support all of our kids, including students who would be coming from the Trefford Elementary.
So that, you're saying the 27th, so that's 2 weeks.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I guess who's gonna do what between now and then to get the information that you think we need to make the final decision? And what are the, there's gotta be a plan that you're
Yeah.
gonna do this, or Dr. Patterson's gonna do that, or maybe the group's gonna do what. So what information, and it does, you don't have to spell it out, but within the next couple of days, there's gotta be a plan laid out to say, by the 27th, we're gonna have all the data we need to make a decision.
I think one of the big ones is, I know that the high school is not there yet as far as the charter, but I'd be really curious to start playing like what possibly could PD look like, but also reflecting back at what our strategic planning is too. So that we're not going, like we're still in alignment and we're still in that process. So this is a difficult time because we got things working at different motions and different speeds. And I don't want to just jump into something when we could, if we just have more time, we might be able to provide a better solution or answer versus.
Right. And I'm okay not doing it
Yeah.
tonight, waiting until the 27th. I'm not arguing that point. I'm just saying we have to have a plan in place for the work to get done by the 27th to gather whatever data we need to gather. Because, you got a lot of people waiting on an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything you said is valid. I'm not disagreeing with it one bit. It's just, I don't want to be the 27th and be saying, okay, we still need data, we still need information. So that's where I'm coming from.
Other thoughts? I just want to hear from the rest of the group too before.
I was thinking the same a little bit with what Rick was thinking, just what information are we gonna learn between now and then? That's the part I'm at, right? What am I gonna learn different about this bigger picture?
Mhm.
And if we do have that, I'm gonna need time to review. Personally, I can say, you know what I mean, and put it all together.
Mhm.
And then is there any other time for discussion amongst the group, or is it just on the 27th? So.
Stephen and Vicky?
I'm kind of the same place. It's like I kind of feel like I'm not sure what questions to ask. I don't know what information what more information you're looking for. If it's more that we need to financially, what's happening. I mean, I get the grant, but I mean, what information do we need?
Well, I think the things that Matt went through, he'll be working with that and getting us information, I would assume. As you mentioned the different effects that this will have in the decision making. So,
Yeah, I think, one of the things is just, one of the questions is, what is, I'm not saying we have to have the PD laid out 100%, but I'm curious, what could that look like? I also am curious if this is called the NFDL Charter High School, is there a frame? If it's not called Trefford, what is that frame, kind of what Nick was alluding to before? Do we have a piece where we can say, and if it is work-based learning or whatever it might be, project-based, associated with X, Y, and Z in the community, that we can do that outreach? I'd be curious a little bit more about what that could be, knowing what Nick has already developed in his work for establishing the upcoming schools. So in and outside, and I think we've got to just have that conversation with probably Dr. Patterson, Meg, other players in the room here too, to really determine what could that look like and what we want in the high school level so we can have that training. If the school is not called Trefford High School, I don't know, I'm asking you as well, like, does that make sense to have that conversation and dialogue before we set the? Yeah, Dr. Patterson or Mag or,
I think there's always value in having that conversation. I think we've been having that conversation on the high school planning committee, wanting to make sure that we're really encapsulating our approach to learning. It will hold true to the Trefford approach and what we've built at the lower levels in elementary and middle. But is there the potential for it to have a wider reach? If we, well, still honor Dr. T, of course, I will do that daily. If we look at naming this in a way that may spike some interest and get people listening to us when we say and we preach and we yell from our building that this is for all kids and benefits all kids. I still think we're battling the community's perception of that.
Yeah, right now, the commitment, irrespective of the name, are to these 14 kids and their families. I mean, that's the commitment we made. We say, well, a lot more kids that could benefit from it. Great, let's figure out how to do that. Bring it on. So I understand the importance of the name, and I think there are ways to. I think we just have to talk about it.
And I think, the largest, in my perspective, the decision is, what we presented today in terms of the planning, the approach, the vision and mission of the school. Well, yes, that will continue to evolve as we continue to plan. That is the basis and the foundation of our school. And so whether we call it Trefford High School, whether we call it
Nino High School.
No.
Is that too patronal?
At the end of the day, I think it's about what is our shared vision, mission? Is this partnership a reality? And then let's conquer the world.
Let's dig in.
So those discussions can definitely continue to happen. And I think we've got a flexible group of learners that will do anything to make this continue to move forward.
Vicki, your question about, what information, my suggestion is, how can you answer the question? How do you know, or what do you need to know? Are you meeting the needs of all the students in the district to the extent to which you need to? I mean, that's just broad, motherhood and apple pie. But that's kind of where we're at. And so it's like, heck, we can give you more financial information, and this is goes without saying. There'll be a debate on how many classrooms. There'll be a debate on how many students. There'll be a debate on how many staff are required. That's bring it on. That's what we want to talk about. But I think that's the bigger question. And is this the time? That's kind of how we see it. Not kind of. That's how we see it. This is the time. As we say in Rhode Island, not for nothing. The money's there to do some things we may not be able to do. But then again, you're trying to balance it against. I mean, that's a heavy question. Are you meeting the needs of the best? But those are your discussions, and they have become, thanks to Ned, I feel like we got the Andy on the board, our board.
And I think equally, you have to believe that our commitment to partnership is not for the benefit of 40 students, that our commitment to partnership is the benefit of the district, right? And so you have to ask yourself, are there questions surrounding that and what you're asking of our group of governance board? And why would you sign a contract with us?
Right. Fair question.
Rick,
But we love our 40
where does that leave you?
students.
I'm just kind of curious. Do you want more finite, like this is what this is?
I'm ready to go. So, I mean, the only real issue to me is, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 classrooms for next year. Do we have
2?
Can we find some space for this? If we can, I think the financial commitment to get 650,000 out and to finally, as a district, take advantage of what these guys are learning, which we haven't, I don't believe, up until you arrived. I I think the investment in that is worth giving it a shot. So, I mean, I understand that, you're doing the strategic planning part, but part of it could be, we'll just roll this into that planning. That, the bottom line is, do we think this is a good thing or not? And for the investment, and getting the grant, and to me, the bigger picture, which they're just talking about, is how do we learn here and spread it across the district, because that was not happening. And that was a waste, that we need to rectify that. And I think that benefit far outweighs, I'm not trying to downplay the cost here. Nobody wants to spend money, but I think the cost benefit comes out in favor of the kids in the district moving forward, so.
So on the other side of this, if we do this in 3 years later, right, we're like, okay, for whatever reason, we as a district can't continue this, then it just stops as far as the high school goes. Yes, I mean, there's no legal something where, well, you started, now you have to.
No.
So you commit to your contract years, right? And then we're up for renegotiation of that contract at the duration of the contract end. We need to be held accountable to say what we're gonna do too, so.
A piece to that, sorry to just step in, but I think what will be really important for you as an authorizer is to have very clear expectations so that you know how to make your decision in 3 years, right? So is it enrollment? Is it financial? Is it certain learning outcomes? Is it how much have they disseminated to the other school? You're gonna wanna really be, so when you're reviewing this on a yearly basis, you can say, well, what did we get these things done? Are we tracking? And then after the 3-year contract or 5-year contract has to be 1 up to 5 with a chart, then you can really make an educated decision of, is this doing what we want? Should we continue to do more of that? But we're gonna really need to know what those marks are, because you need to hold the school accountable to make sure that they're hitting on that. And they should be delivering reports back to you to show that they're hitting. Otherwise, they're kind of guessing too, which I think also has happened over the course of the last.
Right, which I think is
Yeah.
Dr. Mino's whole point of the strategic planning thing is put a plan in place that we're gonna hold people accountable. So you just fall under that umbrella, just like the other schools.
We would expect the same amount of rigor for our schools as you are at the other schools. And, I think we've seen a shift already in the reporting at board meetings and those types of things. It's helpful to have that clarity on what is our shared vision and goals so that we can all clearly state if it's being met or not in an objective way. All for that.
My only pause tonight is just discussion about like naming what this is, and just be very forefront. I mean, I want this to be as inclusive and this, be something where everyone can be part of, including everybody in this room. At the same time, I don't want to put us and pigeonhole us into one spot where this has the potential to, be something beyond. Not saying that the 14 that are in the room right now are even anywhere least important. It's just like this has power to, if done right and named right, it will attract more, people who want to play in our arena.
And what the group decides to call to meet those goals on, it's not a big deal to me. I understand your point that it can be a big deal. But whether we move forward or not, I mean, that would be it.
Will we look, so just
Yeah.
between now and the 27th, will we be able to learn what that is? Is that a reasonable, you know what I mean? Or is that not? That's, I guess, the question I'm at. Is that something?
Well, and I don't know how the governance board they started with the NFDL charter high school. I'm just curious, is this something that people can feel good about too?
Sure.
In moving forward, if that was a proposal, like saying, if we're gonna go through with making another charter high school, or another charter school plus a high school, are we okay as a community to say it would be a different name?
And that would be a discussion that we would appreciate having the opportunity to have with our governance board. It's been something that's been discussed and conversations been had openly. I think with our community as well. I could argue up and down both ways on
Yeah.
where I see the value on both sides of the coin.
Well, I guess the question, and maybe this is where I think John might be going, is does that affect the yes or no vote, what the name's gonna be?
Yeah, and then also, if we can't have that information, does that date change? Not saying the date of the meeting, but and then how does that impact? I saw your, you know what I mean, the month, so like there's kind of a continuation to it that.
I think our parents would probably be supportive calling it whatever if we.
Yeah.
They also said they didn't care where the two were.
Yeah.
But I do
thought they were
caution us to think about,
Pizza.
there's a message being sent if we're
Right.
trying to be more inclusive and we're trying to change the name. There's also a message being sent if we're saying we're changing from Trevor because, and what would cause us out of the value that we've seen at our elementary school to make that change. I think it's very important for us to have a discussion and a shared agreement on, because we could very unintentionally send the message that I think we've all been working to, change, is that strength-based individualized approaches work for every student. That Treffert approach is for every student. And so by changing the name, are we abandoning years' work of disseminating? I'm not saying we're against it, or that's where I would be, my argument for our governance board. I just say we need to be very aware of the implications on both sides.
Okay, well, I think we've got a lot of information to digest, and Matt, Dr. Mino can supplement that and with his discussions with the high school board or whatever, and get stuff to us if we need, for planning for that meeting on the 27th.
I guess my wonder though still is, like, in that meantime, is that something could the governance board look at, so that we could have an answer? If we're talking about, are you okay with a different, and having that conversation, then bringing that back and saying, yeah, we're good. And then we go,
Well, I guess my question is to the board members, would the name affect whether you vote yes or no? I'm not asking you which way you're voting, but would the name change affect a yes or a no vote?
To me, it wouldn't. I don't think that's something that.
I don't know enough about that. Like, I guess that's the part I'm saying is like, I can't answer that. I'm fully supportive of what you just shared, 100%, but I don't know I need to learn more about what that means. That's why I'm asking in between now and then, I'd love to have that information so that when I do say yes, and I'm not saying I'm going to, but when I do, I'm kind of be careful how I say that. But I want to make sure I fully understand that piece of it, right? So.
I mean, I could argue both sides of that. I mean, it's our district, so I get that, right? And being true to our district, but at the same time, having the Treffert name somewhere in there, I mean, that can put our district on the map if in the long run we are implementing all of this district-wide, and it's, yeah.
And I think it speaks to us,
worldwide.
yeah, and us needing to do better when we say we don't know what that means. Like, how do we share what that means more effectively?
Be the only school that does this in the world, and how awesome would that be? But yes, I've been in this district forever, and to not have North Fond du Lac School District somehow, whatever.
I've done
I don't know.
some brief work with a district who has a charter school, and they more or less have the model and the subtitle to the school. There's a school name, and it's something along the lines of based on the Waldorf model, which is a way of educating, and maybe something like that could be looked at where. But
It's really.
I think if you look at the diplomas from other districts that have charter schools, North Fond du Lac School District, it could say Pepperell High School, it could say North Fond du Lac Charter High School. I mean, you could have Horace Mann High School underneath the district name on the diplomas of the kids. Other districts already do that have charter schools. So, that they have different names for the high schools. It's not just north, south, east, or west.
But I also think though, it is something that we should get at least some focus on, because the name is gonna kind of work with what you're saying about some of the focus that we're gonna do with the school. And if the name is gonna inhibit some of that, then maybe that is something important. If it's gonna pocket that group at the high school or wherever it turns out to be.
And that's what also can happen too, just so everyone's in, I mean, working in Appleton, you have various choice places. I think they have 14, 15 charter schools now within the schools. And a lot of their schools are within the schools. And so, sometimes, and it's just like building that bridge too, it feels like sometimes, even though it's in the building, it's still so separate from the rest of the population. It can feel like that. Versus how might we make it more feel like we're all in this, and I think sometimes that name is really key into, making that versus pocketing them and then building off of that. Where, Kaleidoscope, at first was looked at like, what are we in, that's separate. But then it was able to bridge that because it became the ultimate focus of everybody within that arena. But again, I'm just looking contextually, and I'm still learning as well, like history of your elementary, and like what is the perception of what people have, and I want to make sure that that perception, that narrative is changed as well as like shared in the way that we were talking tonight. And I would almost argue that not everybody in this whole village has that complete understanding yet, and we've got to do that job to make that happen.
Okay, is there anything else? All right, then I will look forward to having this on the agenda on the 27th. That's our regular monthly meeting. And in the meantime, if stuff develops or happens or stuff you think we need, obviously you'll share that with us and that. So I'll entertain a motion then to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. And then roll call.
Massey, Hack,
Yes.
Goldowski, yes, Jaeger,
Yes.
Geckerman.
Yes.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for coming, folks.